Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. Today, I will be creating vintage farmhouse Dollar Tree decor with 5 of my friends that you are sure to enjoy. More about that in a moment. Now for DIY number 1. I used this basket I had gotten from Dollar Tree around Easter, and I never did anything with it. So I decided to make a vintage tobacco basket with it. I have been wanting one for a while, and this was the perfect time to attempt it. To start, I removed all the stuff around the top of the basket. I say stuff because I don't really know what else to call it. I then started taking the basket apart and putting all the pieces to the side. I gently pulled all the pieces out of the weaving of the basket. Be careful when you're doing this because you don't want to break any of the pieces. After getting all of the pieces removed, I placed all the pieces of the basket in some hot water in my sink for about 5 minutes, and then laid them out on a towel and straightened them. While the basket pieces were still damp, I began creating my tobacco basket. I know it's hard to see, but the tape wouldn't stick to my silicone mat. I used painter's tape and taped down 7 of the longer pieces from the basket. Next, I began weaving the other pieces into those 7 pieces. To weave it, I simply went under, over, until I reached the other side. And then on the next row, I went over, under, and so forth. I continued doing this until I was happy with the amount of weaving. I tried to keep the distance between the pieces close to even, but I wasn't worried about them being perfect. Next, I created an X with 2 more of the pieces and attached them with hot glue. I started going around the tobacco basket and carefully bending up pieces to the size I wanted the basket to be. Once I got the first 2 sides bent, I went ahead and started attaching the side of the basket. I attached 2 end pieces first, and then attached the centerpiece. I placed all the sticks towards the outside of the basket because this is how it was shown in a video that I watched. But I think next time I will also weave the outside of the basket. Starting on this side, I did the weaving technique, and I think it looked more realistic and it held better. I would place one of the pieces on the outside and then the next one on the inside, and just work my way around the entire length of the basket. I also got smart at this point and started using clothespins to hold everything together until the glue had dried. I went around the basket and started turning down the longer pieces. and then trimmed all the pieces so they were even with the top of the basket. I glued another stick around the outside edge of the basket and again used clothespins to hold everything until the glue was dry. I did this around the entire basket. Once I was finished, I trimmed away any long pieces sticking up and glued down any pieces that had come unglued. I thought the basket was too yellow looking, so I mixed some Waverly antiquing wax and water together and applied it to the basket. I applied this mixture to both the front and the back, and I didn't wipe it off, I just let it dry. Once it was dry, it was still a little yellowish, so I added another layer of the mixture. I know the basket isn't perfect, but what is in vintage farmhouse decor? I think it turned out pretty good for my first attempt. I will definitely be making another one real soon. Let me know in the comments if you'll be trying this tobacco basket out for your home. All 6 of us came together to show you how we create vintage farmhouse decor using Dollar Tree items. You will find links to all my friends' channels along with a link to the playlist in the description. So make sure you check out all my friends' channels. I'm sure you will enjoy watching them also. Now for DIY number 2. I found 2 of these Dollar Tree coasters in my stash and thought I would use one of them for a large tag for a farmhouse garland. I painted the front with 2 coats of Waverly white chalk paint and let it dry. I used 2 coats of apple barrel King's Gold for the back. I thought it was a very fall looking color and would be perfect for the idea I had in mind. I painted the middle section with apple barrel black paint. I found this cute fall cut file on Design Bundles, and you'll find a link to Design Bundles in the description below. I get a lot of my cut files from them, and they are priced ridiculously low. I cut the design out using my Cricut. I applied it to the King's Gold side of the tag using my Mod Podge roller. I purchased this adorable cow stencil from wish.com and got it in less than a week. I sprayed the back of the stencil with Elmer's Craft Bond and let it dry for just a few moments. I didn't want it to be too sticky, but I did want it to keep my paint from running under the stencil. I positioned the stencil on the round tag and rubbed it down with my Mod Podge roller. And let me tell you, if you do not have one of these rollers, you need one, whether you use Mod Podge or not. I used a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and a clothespin to apply apple barrel black acrylic paint. And I used the pouncing method all around the stencil. I then dried the paint with my heat gun. I removed the stencil and was shocked at how good it turned out. Let me tell you, I have never had much luck with stencils, but this time using the Elmer's Craft Bond worked great. Now for the garland itself. I used 20mm and 25mm beads for the garland. I felt like since the round tag was so large, the garland beads needed to be large also. I strung the beads on a piece of twine until I was happy with the length of it. I then wrapped more of the twine around my hand several times to create a tassel for one end of the garland, and attached the garland to the tassel. On the other end of the garland, I attached the round tag by tying the twine in a knot and trimming it. I think this farmhouse garland turned out so stinking cute. Let me know in the comments what you think. Up next, DIY number 3. I have several of these old red pieces of wood I found and thought they would look amazing as a vintage planter box. I used these Dollar Tree pallet pieces for the ends. They fit perfectly. I decided to try using some of the Star Bond adhesive I had gotten when I became a Star Bond affiliate. I applied the Star Bond to the bottom board and then held the top board until the glue had time to set up. And it only took about 15 seconds or so, and I had a good enough hold to move on. I did the same thing with the other two boards. Now to attach the two side pieces. To do this, I used the Star Bond glue on the Dollar Tree pallets and then the accelerator on the ends of the wood. And I'll tell you, this stuff works amazing. It really takes no time to set up. For the bottom of the planter, I used some chicken wire and stapled it around the bottom. And then trimmed it up and made sure none of the wire was sticking out. For the end pieces, I did what I would call a sloppy paint job using Waverly Crimson chalk paint. And then went over the entire piece with Waverly Antiquing Wax. This really tied everything together. Just look at how amazing this vintage planter box turned out. The pictures really don't do it justice. It is absolutely beautiful. I think I may have found another one of my favorites. Let me know in the comments what you think. Now for DIY number 4. I found this sign in my stash. I got it from Dollar Tree or Dollar General one. I can't remember. I used an X-Acto knife around the inside and outside edges of the sign to score the hot glue that was holding the picture into the frame. I also used my heat gun to try to heat up the hot glue, and I used a utility knife. I don't know why, but this sucker was hard to come apart. I wish I knew what type of hot glue they used. Once I got everything removed, I decided to use the back of the picture, and I painted it with apple barrel white paint and dried it with my heat gun. I got this stencil from wish.com, and I thought it would make a cute vintage farmhouse sign. I sprayed the back of the stencil with Elmer's Craft Bond and let it dry for a few seconds so it wouldn't be quite so sticky. I applied the stencil to the painted board and rolled it down with my Mod Podge roller. I applied the paint by pouncing, not rubbing, onto the stencil using a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and a clothespin. I decided to paint the frame with the same black apple barrel paint I had used on the stencil. Once everything was dry, I used some Waverly steel chalk paint and a small fan brush to distress the sign. I placed dabs of hot glue in the corners of the frame and reattached the picture. I used my finger sander I got from Amazon to distress the frame and then attached twine in the holes at the top of the frame so it could be hung. I made a simple bow using some of this Dollar Tree ribbon. I love this ribbon, and I'm so happy I found it. You will definitely be seeing more of it in the upcoming videos. I think it is so cute and farmhouse. I attached the bow in the corner of the frame with hot glue. And just look at how vintage farmhouse this sign is. Let me know in the comments what you think of it. Don't forget to check out this amazing vintage farmhouse Dollar Tree decor playlist to see what my friends came up with. The link is in the description. And finally, DIY number 5. For this project, I used 2 Dollar Tree bamboo cutting boards and some beads. I think these are from Walmart, but I really can't remember. I began by staining the wood and the beads with Waverly Antiquing Wax. That's when I realized the beads had a sealer on top of them, so I had to change my plan up. I used some 220 grit sandpaper and sanded both of the cutting boards. I then cleaned it with nail polish remover to make sure all the wax was removed. I dried both the cutting boards with my hot air gun. I decided to go with 14mm natural wood beads from Amazon. I'll leave a link for these beads in the description. I hot glued the beads around the edge of one of the cutting boards and placed them side by side, touching each other. After I had all the beads on the first board, I used hot glue again to attach the second board. I used these wood discs for the feet of the riser. I found them in my stash and can't remember where I got them. I must have gotten them when I was making jewelry a few years back, but I really can't remember. I hot glued 2 of the discs together and then glued them to the bottom of the riser. You could leave the riser and stain the beads and feet, but I decided to change mine up a little. I used Waverly plaster chalk paint and painted the entire thing. I paid special attention to the area around the beads. I wanted to make sure it was white. I painted the top, the bottom, all sides, and the feet of the riser. Next, I used Waverly Elephant Chalk Paint to distress the riser. I used the dry brush method and a fan brush for this, and lightly covered the wood until I was happy with the amount of distressing. I made sure to distress not only the beads in between the cutting boards, but also the discs I used as feet. This riser turned out so amazing, and it was actually an easy project to do. Let me know in the comments what you think of the riser. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see y'all next time. Happy crafting!